Joining us live now, the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, James Paterson. Thanks for your time. So let's cut to the chase. As it stands, from what you know about it, will you be supporting this?
I wish I could give you a clear and straight answer on that now, Tom, but we really have to wait and see until we have this hearing tonight. The Senate is voting right now to agree to hold a public hearing for a couple of hours this evening, which will at least give us a basic opportunity to ask some questions and have answers put on the public record about what this bill does, why it's necessary, what the risks are, and is it constitutionally sound? And without having answers to those questions, I can't tell you what we'll do.
So you want to clarify those particular questions. What are red flags here? What answers would you hear tonight that would mean you would not support this bill?
Probably our biggest concern, other than the rushed and botched process, is the possibility for unintended consequences that could cause more people, as they have already done under this government, to try and get on a boat and come here and make that dangerous journey. We've had 12 or 13 boats already, 2 that have made it to the Australian mainland, drop people off and return without detection.
But Dan Keane mentioned this, so it doesn't making something tougher. How would that mean people would come here?
Well, just before I get to that, and those shocking reports last week of a capsize of a boat carrying Rohingya refugees with potentially dozens of people drowning. We cannot go back to those bad old days under the previous Labor government. We don't want to see that people smuggling trade started again, but there's some signs it has. How would this exacerbate it? Well, for example, if the minister designates Iran as a relevant country of concern, that means that no one in Iran can apply lawfully for a visa to come to Australia unless they qualify for an exception. And that may mean someone from Iran seeking to come to Australia may instead choose to come via boat, and we don't want to inadvertently encourage that behaviour.
All right, well, I reported this morning the 2 countries they're looking at are Iraq and Iran. Do you have a view on those countries being singled out in relation to saying you can't have any visa holder come here other than close family of people already here? I mean, it seems a bit extreme in a way. And what's to say, I guess, that the governments there will go, oh, no Iranians or Iraqis can come to Australia. We better take the detainees back.
Well, I don't have a preliminary view on that, and we'll be asking about it tonight, except to observe that, yes, there certainly are people from both those countries who have refused to cooperate, who have not been able to be sent home, who've been found not to have a genuine reason to be here. So this is a serious public policy question, one that would be good to solve, but we want to make sure the government has got the detail right before we sign off on it. And we're not going to grant them a blank cheque based on a briefing at 7:30 this morning on a bill that we know they finished drafting last week and didn't even bother to tell us about.
Surely politically, though, you end up just saying tough measures on criminal detainees, etc. We've got to go with it.
Well, let's make sure they're tough measures that actually work. Some of the other measures that the government has rushed through the parliament are right now facing constitutional challenges in the court. We don't want them to fall over. That doesn't help anyone.
Do you believe that the government's introduced this now, 48 hours to go before the Easter break, not because they hadn't had it planned already, but because they didn't want to give you enough time, 2 weeks to drill over this and prosecute your case on this, whereas they've given you a short period of time, this short inquiry tonight, and then they're going to put the heat on you?
I suspect it is political, Kieran, that it's not a genuine policy problem. I mean, Murray Watt said 8 days ago that they were going to be bringing forward legislation. This drafting was finalised on Friday afternoon. They could have informed us then. They could have briefed us at least on the principles or shared the legislation. They waited until Tuesday morning, I think, knowing they've cancelled a sitting day on Thursday. It's a very short window of opportunity to consider this. We want to do the right thing in the national interest. We don't want to expose the community to any more danger than they already have been by the government's totally botched handling of this crisis.
It sounds to me from what you're saying, Dan Keane, saying that there's no guarantee at all that you're going to back this.
We can't give that guarantee on the strength of what we've seen so far.
You think it stinks already?
Well, we just don't know because we haven't had the opportunity to inquire into this. Even if we do get this hearing for 2 hours tonight, Kieran, there's going to be no independent witnesses, no independent experts. There's just going to be the department giving their answers to our questions. I mean, it's going to be a very limited inquiry. So we have to really make the most of that opportunity and get to the bottom of this.
But if you don't pass it, they'll belt you for 6 weeks, won't they? And they'll say you're soft and that you're allowing detainees to be released. It's a classic wedge.
Well, it's the government that's released 152 detainees now, 18 of whom have reoffended against the community, 10 of whom broke their visa conditions and cannot be charged for that because the government botched up the issuing of their visas the first time. So while we want to solve these problems, we don't want to do it in an incompetent and rushed way as the government's shown they'll do in the past.
The US media is reporting that some of this Chinese malware targeting critical infrastructure in the US has been designed specifically to be switched on if the US ever goes to Taiwan's aid. This is extraordinary. Are you confident that Australia has enough protections in place when it comes to our own critical infrastructure, protecting, for example, submarine cables?
There is no innocent purpose to have a dormant presence on a critical infrastructure or civilian infrastructure network like an electricity network or a water network or a gas network. The only purpose is for that to be activated at a time of choosing of the actor to do sabotage and malign damage to our society. So if it is on there, and I think we needed a lot more work to make sure that it's not, then we've got a lot more work to do to get it off and protect ourselves because it is a major national security threat. We've invested a lot in this. We brought in Red Spice. We initiated the critical infrastructure reforms, but there's more to do.
What about this attack on the New Zealand Parliament? Could that be a retaliation for Winston Peters pushing back with the Chinese Foreign Minister for AUKUS? Do you have a view on this?
As I understand it, this occurred in 2021. And the
Right.
truth is that Chinese intelligence agencies have an insatiable appetite for intelligence and information about Western democracies, particularly Five Eyes democracies, New Zealand, Australia and others included. And they have been looking for vulnerabilities, whether it's MPs or electoral systems, to get that insight.
Just to wrap up on the detainee issue, when you're talking about the incentive maybe for people to travel here, are you saying broadly that if something's too tough or too harsh, that somehow creates some sort of incentive?
We're saying if it's not well designed, it might leave gaps open that can be exploited by people smugglers. And this government has watered down Operation Sovereign Borders, for example, by abolishing temporary protection visas, which were very important in upholding Kevin Rudd's promise that if you come here by boat, you'll never get to stay. Now, we now know that's not true. People who came here by boat are going to stay because they've abolished that protection. And that sends a terrible message to the region, to people smugglers and to wannabe asylum seekers that maybe if you get here under the right circumstances, this government might cave too.
And what about the mandatory minimums, 1 year if you refuse to go home? What's your view on that? Could you, for example, support that element but not the, designating countries element?
Well, I note, Andrew, that's another violation of Labor's national platform when it comes to mandatory
It
minimum
is,
sentences.
but
I wonder
what's
if anyone
your
in the caucus committee spoke up about that last night or today.
I doubt it, but
We're not
anyway.
opposed to that in principle. We think it
Right.
is necessary. We don't want to see a situation where judges give tokenistic slaps on the wrist for what are serious issues. So, in principle, we're not opposed to that. Again, we want to look at the detail.